Welcome all to another episode of Byside Piece. Today, we're very excited to have yet another fintech entrepreneur with us. To quickly introduce, Rathin Shah is a co-founder of a Y-Combinator backed startup called Spenny. Now, he, along with his co-founder Gaurav, is building a one-stop asset management solution for India. So, welcome, Rathin. Welcome to Byside Piece.
Hey man, thank you so much. First of all, thank you to BITS Hippies to give us this opportunity. Both Gaurav and I would be excited to be here, and very excited to see how this conversation goes.
Sure. So, shall we start with Spenny itself? So, Spenny is your second venture after your successful exit from the first one. So, can you tell us what Spenny is all about, and where do you sort of position Spenny in the Indian fintech space?
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So the genesis of Spenny happened because of one basic point, which is that Indians did not invest enough. And for context, let me just go back a few years. I started working in JP Morgan as an investment banking analyst at the start of my career, and during that time, given that I was in the finance field, a lot of my friends and family would keep asking me as to, where should we invest our money, or where do we, put our money in, and do you have any stock tips, to stock recommendations, etc.
Yeah.
And although I did not have those kind of sort of answers for them, but the thing that made me realize one thing was that people in India, there were so many people who were looking to invest, who wanted to invest, but they weren't really investing. To give you an example, about 55% of the population in US invests. And as opposed to that, in India, only 2.9% people invest. And that's not because there's a lack of money. That's because people don't have enough time or knowledge. That is the major issue. So we set out with a very simple goal. The goal was to create the easiest and the fastest way for someone to start investing. That was the goal. And so, that is how, that was the genesis of idea. And then eventually Spenny turned out to be it shaped down to being positioned as something where we can make investing interesting and automatic. So the basic idea is that every time you, as in the user, makes any digital transaction, we take that amount, we round it up to the nearest 10 rupees, and we invest it automatically. And so we're basically targeting the young sort of millennial population who are just coming out of their graduation, entering into their first jobs. So they will have to start investing at some point. So that's the crowd that we're going after.
Right.
And so people between the ages 22 to about 35-ish. Yeah. So that's sort of the...
So we can say Spenny sort of bridges that awareness gap plus an avenue to invest. So it's like awareness plus an avenue for people to invest, right?
Yeah. If I were to summarize it in like 4 or 5 words, I would say we are just creating the easiest and the fastest way to save and invest, to start saving and investing. That's the goal.
Great. So, okay. And so it's not uncommon to see young founders coming out of college, working a couple of years, and then moving on to entrepreneurship. It is similar in the case for you as well, but except one difference. At such a young age, you're already a second-time founder. So how do you perceive yourself as a founder? Do you want to jump from different ideas to ideas, or do you want to find the best one and stick on to that? Like, what is your idea as a founder?
To be honest, I think that really also depends on the context and phase of life that you are in as an entrepreneur. Like, irrespective of the idea itself, it's also like, what stage of life are you in? So for me, the first startup that we started, it was actually something that was conceived as an idea back during my university days with a couple of very good friends there. And so I worked at JP Morgan for a couple of years, and after I quit that, the idea was, I wanted to continue working on RecoPro, which was my previous startup. 2 years down the line, however, we struggled quite a bit there, and we realized that there were a lot of issues, and it wasn't really shaping out to be as to what we were thinking. And so eventually, when we got a little bit of momentum, I decided, it's the right time to sort of, look for an exit. And so that's why, look for an exit in that case there, and then started working on Spenny as the second venture. With respect to your answer as to would I like to jump from idea to idea or stay true to one particular idea, I really think that it depends on time. But at the moment, I think I'll stay true to this for as long as possible is what I see, because I feel like this is a big enough problem. And there are not one solution to this. Like there can be multiple solutions to this, and until we figure out a nice nice solution that can fit the market and which may take years, I think we are here to stick around.
That's why your ultimate aim is to make a one-stop asset management solution. You're going to grow this. Yeah, makes sense. All right. So can you speak a bit about your life before being an entrepreneur? You just touched upon your stint at JP Morgan. So how about your college, your stints at KPMG and JP Morgan, everything?
So back in college, when I started university, I graduated out of BITS Goa. And I think one of the best sort of experiments, sort of the atmosphere in BITS Pilani universities, any of the BITS Pilani universities, is that you don't have any attendance. So you're literally free to do whatever you want to do. And we explored, like that was the best time you can explore. And that was the time I really took to explore a lot of stuff, different kind of sort of startup ideas. In fact, this was not the first startup idea. I randomly tried a couple of other startup ideas, which spectacularly failed as well. Did a bunch of other things during university days before actually zoning out on sort of zoning in on this particular idea. And then we started RecoPro there on campus. But at that time, we made a decision that we actually want to work a little bit, get some sort of a financial asset built out, get a little bit of salary in and understand how organizations work before getting into the startups. So that's why we decided to take up jobs. My two other friends with whom I had founded like RecoPro. So at that time that was the decision. So I went to JP and a couple of them went their own ways. But then after that, 2 years later, I think it was time for me to sort of, I had already decided I wanted to do this at all costs. So started this. The interesting journey, I think, is after that. So after RecoPro, Spenny did not happen right away. There was like a gap of 8 to 10 months, in fact. And during this time is when I actually massively explored. I just tried out every single thing that I ever wanted to try out in my life. And that includes wild things. For example, I did travel blogging for a month.
Nice.
Then I'd actually gone on a solo Euro trip across Europe for like a long amount of time, travel blog that thing. Then I performed stand-up comedy. So for the next 2-3 months, I just performed stand-up comedy across. I was based in Mumbai at that time, so across shows in Mumbai and all that. Post that, I did music. So I'm actually a trained percussionist. So for a month, I just put out music videos, different kind of percussion videos on tabla and body percussion, a cappella basically, and all of these things. And I tried a bunch of these things. And during this time is when I actually applied for my MBA as well. But at the end of it, at the end of all of these experiments, I finally decided to actually get back into startups. And that's how then started, that is Spenny basically.
Very interesting, man, because it's good that you took a good break, because you, after your exit from the first one, again, you spend enough time to regroup yourself and then find the interest that you like, and then that's good. Okay, carrying on from that, you received an MBA admit from INSEAD, but then at a very crucial juncture, but then you decided to lead Spenny instead. So first question, what gave you the confidence to make that decision?
Right, interesting. This is probably easily one of the hardest decisions I have made in my life. I'll tell you the story. Basically, I received the INSEAD admit. And I was doing this, as I mentioned, I was doing this bunch of random activities at that time. I was basically experimenting month by month. And I was about, I think I just had last 2 weeks remaining. I had 2 weeks remaining before which I had to leave for INSEAD. I had already put in my security deposit to secure my seat and all that. But somewhere, at the inside of me, I really felt that, I don't want to pursue an MBA. I actually want to go for a startup or something of that sort, but I definitely don't want to pursue an MBA because it seemed a safe option. And given my age right now, and given the fact that, right now is the best time for us to experiment and try and probably fail and, make a mark. And so in that sense, it was always the case that I was actually looking for something to happen. Spenny was not around at that time. There was no mention. We did not even have this idea at that time. In fact, I had not even met my co-founder Gaurav at that time.
Okay.
So so it was really just a leap of faith. And at that time, I decided to. I thought if I'm not going to go for an MBA, I need to have something in hand, something concrete in hand for me to let go of. Yeah. And so what I decided was, let me actually apply to accelerators, startup accelerators, and see what happens. So I applied to this wonderful accelerator called EF. It's Entrepreneur First. That's based in Singapore. And I got I received an invite from there. And 2 days, probably 2 or 3 days before I was supposed to make the final decision for INSEAD, I actually got into EF. And so that is like extremely crunch time. I was this close. I was 2 days close to actually making a completely radically 180-degree opposite sort of decision in my life. And then thankfully I got this offer, and I was like, I immediately wrote a mail to INSEAD. Sorry, I cannot make it there, and I dropped out of that thing, and decided to pursue EF basically.
That's indeed a life-changing one. And so when you say you did not want to do an MBA, so can you visualize what learning you'd have got from that MBA versus what learning you're getting now from Spenny? Can you sort of like compare that?
Yeah. All right. So first thing is, with all due respect, I have no this thing. I mean, people who pursue MBA, total respect to those guys, because that is something which probably fits into their sort of line of or life plan or whatever. For me, it was just not the right thing, because what I realized is that if I do an MBA, especially from an international university like INSEAD, what happens is that it's expensive. It is massively expensive. And I would have to take up a loan, and to repay that loan, I would have to do a sort of a very traditional
job for a
job.
couple of years, minimum years.
Yeah, at least a couple of years, if not more. So let's say in banking, consulting, any of these sort of
so
domains.
You'll be stuck in a sort of loop, right, to pay back the loan again. Yeah,
exactly. And so I was at that time, like, I just turned 26 at that time, and I thought if I go for my MBA, it will be like a couple of years of MBA and then a couple of years of working to repay the loan. It would mean I would just touch my 30s at that time, and then post that to leave all of that and then start a venture. With every passing year, your risk-taking ability also decreases.
Yeah.
And you don't have that much freedom. Basically, you will have more responsibilities. And so I thought, you know what I mean? We just have one life, and I'm going to just try and explore and not go for the traditional path. And so the idea was that, I just wanted to try out EF. And it was not just try out. I had decided this is the way, this is it. And I really want to make this count. So much that I don't ever regret the decision of turning down INSEAD, because it's not an easy. It was not an easy decision to turn down INSEAD.
Reject them.
So, yeah.
Okay, so when you said you got an invite just 2 days before the final date. You got an admit from EF. So and then again, Spenny is backed by Y-Combinator. So what is the role of EF and Y-Combinator in your entrepreneurial life?
Yeah. So EF has both of them have one very specific sort of role. And if I were to point it down to just one thing, EF helped me find a brilliant co-founder in Gaurav. Basically, I met Gaurav at EF in Singapore, and I don't think I would have ever met someone as wonderful and brilliant as he is if EF had not happened. So extremely lucky there. I mean, I am seriously lucky to have found someone like that there. So, and of course, apart from that, EF also helped us shape out the initial idea, shape out the sort of the initial thesis, the first version of the product, also gave us our first investment, sort of our first check. So yes, all of those counts, but I think the biggest contribution was, helping me find the best co-founder I could. And then from there on, we applied to YC, got through YC as well, fortunately. And YC has been transformational in more ways than one. And I think I cannot recommend YC enough to startup entrepreneurs. And of all the things that they've sort of helped us build out. There are two things which I will always take away from. One is their extreme focus on finding product market fit. It is their mantra. Their whole one thing is to help founders focus on building a product that people actually want. It's literally their tagline: make something people want. So that's the one thing. And the second thing is they've massively helped in raising a seed round. So without YC, I mean, I can't imagine raising a seed round during COVID times, when you are not able to meet investors, just completely on Zoom calls, without even one physical meeting. We were able to raise our seed round, and I think that's all due to YC.
YC, right. So these are very limited positions. These are very coveted companies and positions, and it's very hard to get into. So, say if an entrepreneur is not able to get into a YC or a similar accelerator program, so how do you what do you say to can you suggest to those entrepreneurs? How can they sort of bridge that gap?
Yeah, I think yes. One thing is, while if you get into these, it's you would be super fortunate. But it also does not mean that, I mean, if you're not into YC, you cannot build out a company. Clearly, I mean, if you take the numbers, obviously the number of companies which are successful, which are not YC backed, far outweigh the companies which are YC backed and successful companies. So it's not as if this is the end of the world. However, what we can do is that there are two parts to leveraging any community. One is the knowledge that you get from within the community, and the other is the network. Now, for the knowledge part, I really don't think it is really a big deal anymore, because YC itself has the YC Startup School, which is online. They have put out the entire coursework online. You also have the Y-Combinator YouTube channel, on which you pretty much find out all the content there that they teach you at YC. Basically, literally everything that you need to know in terms of as a founder, that the things that you should know in terms of whether it's finances or product or tech or how to build a team, or how to hire, how to raise, etc. Literally all these things are something that they put out in the knowledge modules, which is open source. Anybody can access it. Okay. So knowledge is not really a concern now. So the second part is the network, which, because if you're part of the community, you get access to that network. For networking, there are a couple of things. I feel like because of not just COVID, but in general now, because everyone lives on the internet anymore. Nobody has an address anymore. Their address is basically their handle on social media. Right. So because of that, the network is what you make of the network, which means it doesn't matter if you are not into YC, but maybe you can leverage your university's network, and I'm sure that might get you to the right.
Open a lot of other doors. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. If that doesn't work, then probably you can tap into your ex company's network. So your, for example, if I was a part of JP Morgan itself also has a great network, so you can use that. And if nothing of this happens, there are so many thriving startup communities in India today, which are, like, for example, Push Start and a bunch of other thriving startup communities, where if you just be a part of that community, and that's completely free, you can it's just a Facebook group to begin with. And then you get involved in the community, and you really can find out all the right networks that you want to find out from that community. So yes, while it's a little more hard work, but it doesn't still mean that you can't do it, because it is possible, or absolutely possible to do that.
Amazing. Very useful, Rathin. And speaking about your co-founder, he's a top software engineer. He's worked for Netflix, and then he's been a technical lead at many YC-backed startups. So can you tell me what he brings to the table as a co-founder, and what is the synergy that you guys bring together to Spenny?
Yeah, man, absolutely. So, I mean, first, without Gaurav, this was not going to be possible at all. He's one of the best people I know in product and tech. He has an eye for product, which I have not seen probably anyone, if any. Very, very few people have that kind of a knack for product to sort of not just predict, but sort of have a vision for what can work, what can't work. And an eye for design, what looks good, what doesn't look good, etc. Right from there down to the minor things as to actually executing. He's one of the best executors I've seen. While building out our product, actually, initially, this is back when we were, before YC happened at EF, he dished out the initial version of the application, the entire application himself. He was the only coder at that time. And he put it out in like less than a week, and we created a fintech app in less than a week, like the first version of it. And I think that just speaks volumes as to how much and how insane his level of execution is as well. So yeah, I mean, super lucky to have someone like him as on the same team. He himself, I think he has he had been a freelancer for quite a major part of his life. He has worked on projects with Apple and Netflix and literally all the big tech companies. He was also a core team member of Ixigo when they were scaling out back from 2016 onwards, 2016, 17, like those years. Ixigo was on the verge of like breaking out, especially Ixigo trains and all that. And he was a very sort of a core member of that team. So he has his hand around growth hacking as well. So yeah, I think we complement each other well. I sort of bring the business and the finance perspective to the table, while he literally takes care of the entire tech side and the product side. So yeah.
Right. So do you think it's very important that the co-founders don't have much overlaps, that one person brings in completely different side of a startup, the other person brings in a sort of entirely different perspective? Do you think that's important, or do you think overlaps is fine?
So I have the way to answer this, I think, would be that in any startup, I think if a startup has to be successful, and I think I got this really from EF, basically, you need two elements. You need you need someone to build, and you need someone to sell. That is the goal, right? You need someone to actually build a product, and you need someone to sell that product.
Right.
Iske baad, anything over this is basically a complication of this simple concept. The concept is very simple: build and sell. Now, if everyone, like your core team member, as in the co-founders of a startup, if it doesn't matter if you're a single solo founder, or you are two founders, three founders, co-founders, if the team put together can build and can sell, you're good to go. I think that's the baseline to measure it. It doesn't matter if you have overlap, if you don't have overlap, etc. As long as you both are clear, as in everyone within the team is clear as to what your role is. Your primary role is building, your primary role is selling, I think you're good to go.
Makes absolute sense. And okay, now behind all the success that you have now, I'm sure the mistakes that you made throughout the journey and then the lessons you picked up had a huge impact on where you stand now. So do you have any interesting moments to share, something for the budding entrepreneurs?
Yeah, in terms of the mistakes?
Yeah, the mistakes and the lessons learned.
I mean, I don't even know where to begin. I mean, there were so many mistakes. To be honest, first of all, we haven't really yes, we've been backed by YC, and yes, it's an exciting time for us to be building out this product. We really haven't reached success, so to say, because literally we are still starting out, to be honest. But in terms of the mistakes, even in the journey that we have had, oh man, we've committed some massive mistakes. And I think if I were to give you like a couple of examples, so one of them would be one of the things which, and this is basically, I'll take an example from RecoPro, one example from RecoPro and one example from Spenny. So at RecoPro, while we are at RecoPro, one of the biggest biggest mistakes that we made was that when we built out the product initially, and it was a hardware product, mind you, so it has its own sort of challenges, and it is a B2B product. Yeah. So we initially, when we went to sort of the industrialists, at that time, it was our market was basically people in industries, and they did not understand the concept of MVP. If we brought them a product which, in the typical startup world, which people think, MVP is the most, build out the most sort of the smallest version possible, hackiest version possible, and if you build that out and you brought to them, they wouldn't have the imagination to think about, hey, oh, this product can be something. They would just directly compare the product. They're not
used to that sort of an environment. Yeah.
Yeah. So they would directly compare that product with the best which is available in the market, and then tell you how shitty your product is. And that sort of went down for some time. And so I decided that, I think the best way to do would be to build out the entire product. So we spent the next 6 months building out the entire product, like right down from bringing the machinery out into actually building the product. And we put in a lot of money into that. And then when we went back to the industry, we realized this is something that they did not want in the first place at all, because this was massively different from what their expectation was. Mistake number one. So this is when I realized the biggest mistake is that, often we have an idea, like we have an idea in our mind, and then we just go out there and then we start executing it without actually taking the customer along for the journey. The best products out there, you actually sell first and then build. As in, it might sound counterintuitive, but first get the customer to actually say yes to a product and then go build it out, basically. And if that means employing different hacks to get to the right MVP, do that. Instead of you going away for 6 months, putting all your energy into the product and then coming out with a product which literally nobody wants. So you've just wasted a lot of time and effort. So yeah, I mean, that's a big mistake. And that's what we realized this time not to do. So at Spenny, what we did was the first version, as I mentioned, Gaurav dished it out in less than a week. And of course, if you dish out a complete application in less than a week, of course, it's not going to be full of all the features and all that, but it served the basic purpose at least. And we got to know that if people were interested in this or not. And once we got that initial interest, we went ahead with the product. So yeah, that is, I think, one of the biggest mistakes. At Spenny, one of the things which I realized, and this is a little more specific to fintech, is how we underestimated how much the regulations and the regulatory authorities play a role in fintech products. For e-commerce products or for other products, this probably might not be the case, but there are certain fields like healthcare, fintech, etc., where it really matters, because you have to depend on a lot of other financial institutions like the banks, the regulatory authorities, etc., etc. So my product might be perfect, it might be the best product, but it does not matter if it is not compatible with the APIs of the bank or the systems of the bank. Then in that case, your product might be the best, but it's just jazz. Nobody really cares.
It can't work in the Indian market there.
Yeah, yeah. So that's what I realized.
Did you keep in mind when you started this? Do you had in mind, okay, this is what I had to do. I had to be compliant with all these things, or you realized it much later, and then you had to like go back and change it?
Yeah, we realized it way later than we should have. That was basically the biggest mistake here. That I mean, we just went ahead and started executing, and we realized this, like a lot of what we were doing was not correct. We didn't have the right licenses, etc., etc. And so obviously one part was getting the licenses, but the second part was building out an infrastructure which is compatible with that of our partner organizations like the banks or the people who do the KYC, organizations that would do your KYC, etc. So we're so dependent on all of these organizations is something that we had not taken into account, And so while keeping timelines in mind, for example, in my head, probably, our engineering team can probably build this out in 2 days. All right, so the timeline for this is 2 days. Doesn't work that way, because until we actually sort of integrate with the tech of the bank, which in itself takes another week, and then the testing from the bank side, which takes another week, etc. So it really throws all the timelines out of the window, and that's what our biggest mistake was, and that's what we realized basically.
Nice. Amazing insights, man. We really got an insight into your entrepreneurial journey and what Spenny is about, your MBA decision. Everything was very insightful, and we would like to wish the very best for you and Gaurav with Spenny.
Hey, thank you so much, man. Thank you so much for having us, and yeah, it was a pleasure chatting with you.
Sure. Thank you so much, man.